Hi scholars, welcome to lesson 6. Today we're going to be going over One Boy's Experience, questions 1 through 4, and then talking about our personal narrative at the end. This is my other cat. His name is Tweety. He's a bit younger than our other. He doesn't have thumbs. The only big difference is that you are a lot more mouthy, and he likes to scream at people a lot more often, especially if he's not getting his way. He's a big baby. Our grow our team value for this week is wonder. So how can we show wonder this week? A big easy way for us to show wonder is to practice some of our lines from our play at Midsummer Night's Dream with our family members. So you all have scripts, you all have ways to read it. If you feel like you always want to read in class but you never get enough, if you're too embarrassed to read in class, this is a great time on your own. Ask a family member or a parent or guardian to record a video of you reading some lines, and then when we come back together, I want to create a little montage of all of our lines so we can make a little compilation video of everyone reading their own. So I'll include my email link at the bottom so that way you can have somewhere to email those videos. Also, I want you to try and attempt to write your own personal narratives. That's part of our assignment today, but just think back on those times that you had some really wonderful ideas and you had to use these great big ideas to get through tough situations in your life. So think back to when you've really had to try and use your brain, maybe a lot more than normal. You're not showing a lot of wonder right now, are you? No, you're just sitting there. So let's look at what our week looks like in the first place. Today we're going to be doing questions 1 through 4, and then you should be working on your personal narrative. Tomorrow we're going to be doing Act 3, Scene 1. It's our last reenactment. And then after that, for the rest of the week, we're doing new things for a Midsummer Night's Dream. So we're going to do 3.2, the summary and breakdown, for Wednesday and Thursday. And then on Friday, we're going to be doing 4.1, the summary and the script, and the summary portion of 4.2/5.1a. I know that seems like a lot, but I'll be going over it with you every day. Next Monday, we're actually going to be wrapping up, hopefully. That'll be our very last day of our play. So make sure that you have that reader available. It's going to be in the description of all of the videos, so you know exactly where you should be looking for our lines. Before we get started on our questions, let's read through One Boy's Experience together as a class. That way it's all fresh in our minds. So it starts with a short introduction giving us background before the actual event. On April 18th, 1906, at 5:12 in the morning, an earthquake struck Northern California. The quake itself was devastating, killing hundreds of people, but the worst was yet to come. As a result of the earthquake, dozens of gas lines ruptured in San Francisco, causing over 30 fires that killed thousands more and left hundreds of thousands homeless. In an attempt to keep the fire from spreading from one building to the next, firefighters in the military blew up hundreds of city blocks with dynamite. Within a few days, the disaster destroyed over 80% of San Francisco. Then it was the ninth largest city in the country. In the July of 1906, Lloyd Head, a boy who survived the earthquake, published the following personal narrative in the newsletter of his Boys Club. Boys Club was a magazine. It might still be around today, mostly for Boy Scouts. But think back to this. This was little over 100 years ago. One of the biggest cities in our country was almost completely destroyed. And think back to it now. When you think San Francisco, you don't think, oh, it's a city trying to rebuild. It's very different, and they seem like they've corrected or repaired most of this damage. But at the time, as you can see, there was a lot of damage, a lot of lives lost, and a lot of people without homes. Now we're going to be starting the actual personal narrative by Lloyd Head. It was between 5 and 5:30 Wednesday morning the trembler came. Backwards, forwards, sideways it shook, making things dance on the bureau as if they were alive, while the dishes in the pantry and the china closet rattled about at a great rate. I guess no one had time to think about what had happened. At least I didn't. I just held onto the side of my bed to keep from falling out, and ducked my head in the pillow, for I was so scared I couldn't even yell. When the shaking had somewhat subsided, I jumped up and ran to my mother's room, where my father and mother and my small sister slept. My father didn't seem scared very much, but I guess he was, all the same, and so were all of us, except the baby. She just sat up in bed and didn't even cry. But I'll bet she thought it was kind of funny. Whenever we heard a rumble, we all piled into the backyard as fast as we could. So think to the difference between the family and the baby. The baby might not be scared because she doesn't have a point of reference and she doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't even know to be afraid in the first place. So to her, it might look funny when the rest of everyone else reacts so large. Next paragraph. When we went upstairs again, we looked in the pantry. What a scene! Broken cups, saucers, plates on the floor, in the sink, and everywhere. It was the same way in the parlor where some of our vases had broken. At first we thought that a number of things had been broken, but we soon found out that we had come off very lucky, for the things that had broken had gone into so many pieces that it looked more than it really was. When we had cleaned up the broken crockery and bric-a-brac and eaten some sandwiches that my older sister had been going out to take a picnic with her that day, we all felt better and went to the window to look out. So if you see some vocab words that seem very odd in this section, I want you to look at the very end of our passage. We have a vocabulary word bank. So words like at the top, we have trembler. That, think like a tremble, like a shake. It's like a quake and an earthquake. There's a trembler. And then bric-a-brac is an old word, usually just means like tiny little knickknacks or accessories. So if you've ever seen like an antique shop and they have a bunch of tiny little like dolls or faces or tiny little like porcelain or like clay toys, that's bric-a-brac. They're just like antiques. People lined the sidewalks, and everything was confusion. Looking up the street, we could see where a large plate glass window had been broken in a store at the corner, and we looked away downtown to see where the city hall was. You could see right through it. They could see right through City Hall. Huh. A fire was blazing further downtown, and rumors are spread around that the cliff house had fallen into the water and that certain cities along the coast were underwater. So a cliff house, this is a proper noun, so it was probably an actual place they're talking about. But think of it's literally just a house that's built on the cliff. Sometimes the house might even be a little bit off the cliff, and they'll have wooden planks coming up from the cliff to support under the house. It seems very dangerous. But for the most part, a lot of them are safe. But in the case of an earthquake, obviously it's not that safe anymore. Next paragraph. Nobody knew what to do, and everyone seemed rattled. The fire was rapidly increasing, and at intervals, slight earthquakes would cause small-sized panics. People would rush to the middle of the street, between the car tracks, and stay there quite a while after the shock had passed away. We had stayed in the house and ran downstairs at every slight shock, and we soon got tired of that. So my mother and sister sewed some sacks together, and my father and I made a tent in the backyard and began a camp there. We made a basic fireplace in the yard by digging a hole in the dirt and placing bricks around it, leaving a place for a draft, like a draft of wind, and then put a piece of tin over the bricks for a stove top. So they dug out a little hole. They put some bricks around it like a typical fireplace, and they put tin in there. Think of like tinfoil in your house. That's something you might use when you're cooking. It's something you should never put in the microwave because it's conductive. It can take heat very well. So you may have seen someone, for example, make baked potatoes before by wrapping it in tinfoil and putting it in the oven so it conducts the heat more. So they're putting tinfoil in there to help with the fire. My mother then went after some stuff to eat, so they wouldn't be without something if we had to go up to the hills to get away from the fire. So the mother went in the house to get out some perishables to bring with them. By this time it was gaining headway, and cinders from the fire came floating down on us until there was a thin layer of them all around the yard. So think of it like ash just coating every part of their yard. Last two paragraphs. The sun shone blood red through a thick haze of smoke, and people began coming in a steady stream from the district near the fire. Think of the phrase blood red. It's not just the sun was bright red, but when you say blood red, it shows that maybe something dangerous or something scary happened, that maybe some blood was spilled, and that this wasn't a very peaceful night. Some carried all they had saved in little carts or wagons, which had before been only playthings. Hatless, coatless, mothers and fathers, with children all packing something, trudged on in the direction of the hills. Night came, and my father and my two sisters and I slept until morning in our tent. My mother stayed up all night watching with the fire with my aunt, mother, and grandmother, who had come over to stay with us and had brought ample, remember ample means extra, ample provisions for 2 or 3 days. Our little brick stovetop now came in handy, for we cooked all our food in it, and it had not been the circumstances under which occurred, I believe we should all have enjoyed our camping out. But as it was anything but pleasant, there was no water, and the noise of buildings being blown up continually startled us. So if this wasn't in the middle of an earthquake, the author, Lloyd Head, is saying this may have been a little nice thing. They had family over, it looked like they were having a nice little cookout in the backyard, but there was no water access, and there was these sharp noises in the background as they were blowing up buildings to stop the fire and the earthquakes. Last paragraph. We went home, and for 2 or 3 days after the fire, we had not much to do but get provisions, cook, now out in the street, for there's no more fires allowed in backyards, sleep, and eat. The people seemed to take all this in good humor, and when you'd walk around, you would see the most comical names on some of the camps, such as things as Camp Thankful, Camp Grateful, etc. So think about these actual camps. If someone's naming their camp Camp Thankful after an earthquake, think, are they being sarcastic, or do you think they're being sincere? Are they being honest? I think you can make a bit of an argument for both. Some people really might be grateful that they're alive, but they might not be thankful that they have to have a little oven, a little makeshift brick stove in the middle of the street so they can cook food for their family. I already had a cat change. One got tired of being on camera. This is Wick. He's the big boy. He has big old hands like this. He's got extra thumbs right here. He could knock a head off if he wasn't careful with him. He's a sweetheart. He doesn't really know how to meow, but he's a big baby most of the time. If I just sit here scratching him, he'll wait. Let's look at number 1 now. Look for an example of personification in the first paragraph, then answering the following questions. So A, they just want you to copy a quote that shows personification. B, what non-human thing is personified? So what non-living thing are they giving human traits to? And then lastly, what is that human quality or action that they're doing? So think back to something like in Hatchet. They said something like the fire danced. So fire can't actually dance. So the non-human thing being personified is fire, and then the human quality we're giving it is dancing. Take a moment, fill this in yourself, and we'll go over it in a moment. So looking back at our first paragraph, look at that very first or second sentence. I'll reread it. It was between 5 and 5:30 Wednesday morning the Templar came. Backwards, forwards, sideways it shook, making things dance on the bureau as if they were alive. So, what non-human thing is being personified? Well, it's items on the bureau, whatever these things are. But what are they doing? Dancing as if they were alive. This should be an easy one. Personification was one of the first things we did this year, so you might have to stretch your brain to get back there. But we see it a lot of the time. You guys are great about still pointing out in Let's Study books. Head writes that when we looked away down to see where the city hall was, you could see right through it. What do you think he means? Why was he able to see through City Hall? So make sure you restate it with, I think head means ... or he was able to see through City Hall because think about what was going on in the city at this time and what was happening to most of the buildings. So what might they be shocked about when they looked down the street to see where City Hall was? So if you've been following along with the damage to the city, you should have something along the lines of my answer. Head means that City Hall was no longer standing when he said, quote, you could see right through it. Or he was able to, quote, see through it because it was destroyed by the earthquake. So I'm not even using a new quotation. I'm using the same one in the answer. I'm just explaining their citation. So think of this one like a race response. They give you a citation and they're asking you, what does it mean? All you have to do is restate and explain. Number 3, why do people rush out of their homes and into the middle of the street at every, quote, slight earthquake and slight shock? So think about comprehension again. Why were everyone so scared in the first place? Why would they want to leave their homes in the middle of this kind of natural disaster? So this is just a comprehension answer. People rushed out into the middle of the street because they were afraid that the shocks would cause buildings to collapse. So like most of us know, if you're inside of a building, you have to get to a very safe point, or if it's possible, getting out of the building is also a good course of action. So in something like if we had an earthquake drill at school, we would most likely find a very safe space, or we would evacuate the building. Luckily, we're not near a fault line, but if you live somewhere on the west coast or near someplace that has frequent earthquakes, you would have a procedure for either getting you to a safe spot of the building where there's minimal threats, or they would get you out of the building as fast as possible. And our last question to review, number 4, Head writes that refugees from the fire transported, quote, all they had in little carts or wagons, which had before been only playthings. So he's talking about people use these little carts or wagons like the little child might use as a toy, but now they're using it to move other belongings. Why would he include this detail? What does it show you about the situation of San Francisco? So why would he include the detail people are using toys to transport their belongings? Think about what that tells you about the situation or what the people were forced to do. So I give you two possible answers here. One possible answer, the detail shows how suddenly the disaster struck. No one had time to prepare to leave their homes. So people weren't using suitcases, they weren't using luggage. It's not like they were planning this trip. They just grabbed whatever was nearby to move all their stuff so they could get out as fast as possible. Think about if there was a fire going on. You wouldn't take the time to get out your backpack, put everything calmly inside. You would just grab whatever you could at that moment in a big handful and just throw it in something and go. You don't have a lot of time to prepare. Another possible answer, the detail shows the great losses suffered by the refugees. If a family is able to fit all their belongings into a child's toy wagon, then you have very little. People have lost not just their homes, but almost everything they owned. So it shows you how little these people would have left over if it all fits in this little toy in the first place. Or it just shows you that they don't have that much left over in the first place. Next, after reviewing, you're going to be starting your own personal narrative. Your topic is to describe a time you and your friends or family worked together in the face of a difficult situation. So that's pretty broad, but it has to be you and your friends working together to fix a difficult situation. So I want this to be around 3 and 4 paragraphs in length. Like all good personal narratives, it's going to go through an entire narrative arc. You can't really do that unless you have 3 or 4 paragraphs. It has to have a proper beginning, middle, and end. Think about an inciting moment. Think about as the problem escalates, there's a climax, everything calms down in your last paragraph. So describe when you work together. You shouldn't describe a situation where you did everything to solve the problem. So I don't want to hear something about, oh, this one time I couldn't get this fixed. So instead of having other people help me out or teach me, I did everything myself and I looked it up on YouTube, the end. Next, if you're struggling to find examples, think to our current situation. Everyone's in a pretty difficult situation right now. A lot of us are stuck in our own homes. We're doing school a little bit difficult. Think about how you and your friends or you and your family are working together right now. What things might you be doing different? So something Mr. Sheehan has to do in my current situation is that I still want to play games with my friends, but I can't have them all come over. So we're using different software. We're using things like Discord or Twitch. We're just streaming things instead of all of us being able to come together and play board games. Lastly, if you can't find good examples of structure or you don't know what yours would look like, look back to the one we just went over, One Boy's Experience. That's going to give you examples of a beginning of our story, an ending of our story, and some really good details throughout, like describing people using the toy wagons, the blood red sun, things like that. People being scared and running out of their house at every little shake shows you just how nervous they are. It has a lot of good tiny details in there that you might want to use in yours. Wrapping up for tomorrow, I want you to access the link below for our reader for the script for A Midsummer Night's Dream. Tomorrow, we're going to do a reenactment of Act 3, Scene 1. So you can reread the summary now. It's really short, just to remember what happens. Remember, this is the scene where Puck transforms Bottom into a donkey. So there's some pretty major things happening. Also, go ahead and try, if you have a chance, to access the reader and record yourself doing a scene or a little monologue from A Midsummer Night's Dream. You can do it by yourself, do it with family, and then send it to my email address. It's on the slide earlier in the presentation. That way I can put together a little montage of all of our videos. In the meantime, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Stay safe and give me a call if you have any questions about your personal narrative. Bye-bye.